Welcome to another full-length episode on a featured blade from my knife box. A blade with long-term ownership relationship, you could say. I purchased this Zero because of my Hation experience. That was my first Shirogorov compact knife with this red carbon fiber from carbon plate and multi-row bearing system and M390 upgrades, which back then were coupled up with the Neon series and came in various blade steels with or without multi-row bearings. They used to categorize these as 1, 2, or 3 bears, but now most base Shirogorovs come spec'd out right out of the box. I did a review on the Hation, and I called it the perfect EDC, which is bold, but that's kind of how I felt about it, and I felt like it was merited. But then I got this Zero and did a follow-up on the ultimate perfect EDC. It was released in May of 2019, which is when I decided to drive up to Recon 1 and pick one of these up. This knife was a pretty big hit right out of the gate, and it is what I consider a full redesign. The blade became more pronounced upswept, tactical draw point, meaning more designed for penetration. But actually, it almost kind of resembled something similar to a chef's blade profile. Now, the new Zero was at 3.3 inches of blade length, compared to the previous 3.2 on the Neon. The body was now smooth, and the typical barrel backspacers were now replaced with a full-length titanium backspacer, which was also gear pattern. Now this was pretty cool because back then you would only find something like this on more of the custom divisions or the full customs. Now despite the blade length increase, the handle length actually got slightly shorter. The original Neon sat closed at 4.3 inches, but it is now reduced to 4.25 inches. Pretty much a full redesign from the Neon from the ground up, and I think it was done extremely well. So, let's get to the topic of discussion. Is this knife really the ultimate EDC? Because to be more objective, this is a really subjective area due to individuals having different daily needs and also various hand shapes and sizes with different walks of life. People just flat out have different daily needs. But this is a knife I've recommended very often for a lot of reasons. And at least to those who are looking for something a bit more high-end, very compact, and a great cutting tool with longevity in mind. So let's start off with the fun part, the blade. This upswept drop point profile blade has two great attributes that stand out in cutting performance at a first glance. The blade tang having a straight-through design from the spine all the way down to the tip ensures strength throughout the blade, especially during penetration.
That's what she said.
Michael, please.
There he is.
Please.
Mwah! There he is.
And this also makes the tip easy to index. The tip also retains a little extra material at the front end of the spine for added tip strength. More milling was done throughout the spine for an added swedge, and the jimping was extended further on the Zero compared to its predecessor, the Neon. The tall flat grind gives a great balance for edge strength and slicing performance, and also the blade stock sits at 0.13 inches, which is pretty thin. To be quite honest, I do have a love affair with this overall blade profile, and honestly the handle too. It's really attractive to my eye. I really want to highlight the plunge grinds on the Shirogorov knives, which is highlighted in this Neon Zero as well. They are so dramatic and angular, and so crisp and clean in its transitions. It's one of those blade visual appeals that I really appreciate. The edge termination is also executed extremely well. From the factory, the Shirogorov Zero came really sharp. The edge bevel is small, clean, and precise, like most other models. I will say that when it comes to resharpening, it is going to be a bit difficult for the average Joe to resharpen this knife with matching edge bevels as they did so precise out of the box. However, I do feel that the bevel reprofile could make this knife a little bit sharper as well. So far, I've done touch-ups with stropping compound and leather, and it's kept its edge over the few years. So that says a lot about the heat treat. The steel type is Bowler's M390 and their target HRC is 62. Now, I have had some friends in the YouTube world who have sent out some of the Shirogorov knives for steel testing with M390, S90V, and LMAX. Even their lesser steels, such as the LMAX, has been known to perform really well. I think this blade is a 10 out of 10. Now, I've used this thing on zip ties, cutting meats, vegetables, and cardboard boxes, and probably a few other things I shouldn't have with. But it's still sitting on the original edge bevels, and with moderate strops here and there, it seems to keep going. Another highlight is the branding is very light on this knife. When looking inside the scales, you may find some info about your knife, this one indicating multi-row bearing system. The logo is one of the coolest in my opinions, the bear, precisely milled out at the end of the show side of the handle. The M390 is printed on the lock side of the blade, tucked away nice and small. Combine it all together and I really like the aesthetics. Next, let's discuss the pivot, and ladies and gentlemen, this is Shirogorov's party piece. Really one of the areas they're most well known for, the multi-row bearing system. Now this is cool because it adds strength for more surface area, and it also allows the blade to move more freely and evenly for the same reasons. I'm not sure who really started the multi-row bearing system, but I can tell you Shiro made them popular. MRBS is considered to be an upgrade back in the day, and you used to have to pay additional for this option, but nowadays it's more generalized in most Shirogorov models. The action is not slammed shut like a Norseman, but it's a controlled smooth glass-like action. The pivot has an external stop pin to secure the rear of the blade tang when locking up. It's a pretty standard way of doing this, and they could have done a fancier hidden stop pin design, but it's not a disappointment. My only disappointment, however, is the proprietary hardware with the lack of tool inclusion inside your kit. This may look like a conventional flathead, but I can assure you, if you use a flathead, you'll mar your hardware. These knives require an expensive takedown tool, which is also sometimes coupled up as a fancy pen. There are other sources who make Shirogorov takedown tools, such as Josh from REK or formerly Razor's Edge, and other people. I think I would have preferred either more standardized hardware or just include the tool with the knife. Otherwise, it's just turned into another added expense and separate effort just to service your own knife. That is the downside to this knife for me. But that being said, the hardware is really attractive. It's solid in quality, and I haven't had the need to take this knife apart yet, so I'll get the tool later. Probably will go aftermarket, just spite of not having it included. The deployment style is a conventional flipper tab that is neatly tucked away. This flipper tab is smooth and very well chamfered, almost too well for its size to be honest. I do love the low profile look of it. It sits forward nicely at a nice angle, which makes the deployment nice and light somewhat. It's set forward just enough for a really nice light switch deployment style. But as far as the push button deployment, doesn't really work as well for me. I know low profile flippers are really sexy, but if it doesn't allow me to index easily and sometimes slip off, it makes it really annoying, but this one is manageable because of the moderate detent strength. The flipping experience could be improved greatly by just slightly increasing the flipper tab, or perhaps less chamfering for more traction. Moving down the line of the mechanics is the Lockbar. This one is really attractive in the cut, and the milling is done really nicely on the relief cut, which looks symmetrical and intentional in design. The front of the Lockbar includes a steel insert and a steel over travel stop, and is designed for the longevity of the bar. A good margin of the Lockbar is split, but the rest is covered with this nice 3D milled clip. The 3D milled clip has a nice slender look and profile. I'm also a fan of the hidden hardware as well. It works perfect for getting it in and out of the pocket because of its smooth machining. The pocket clip is also designed not to initiate any additional pressure on the lock bar when the handle is bared down on. This helps with preventing difficult deployments, and it's pretty smart. The handle design is also really attractive in its overall silhouette. The handle is comfortable, and it's really well suited for most hand sizes. The size is really where this knife shines, and where the ultimate EDC statement really started to come to life. 3.3 inches of blade fitted into 4.25 inches of handle honestly is quite an achievement. And this could only be accomplished by fitting the additional tip of the blade in the back spacer. The spacer has a gear pattern for a little added palm traction, but when you flip the knife around, you can see the tip tuck itself into the back spacer, showing off even greater tolerances and construction of this Russian-made production knife. You heard me correctly. This indeed is a production class knife, and it is sold for $715. Not cheap, but for a production level quality that could almost fool you into thinking it's a custom, I think the price is merited. The show side is clean, showing off the full titanium construction. A stonewash finish on the frame and a bead blast finish on the blade hides wear very nicely. The frame is also fully chamfered in the corners, making this knife smooth and comfortable, even when bearing down a little harder. What's cool about Shirogorov knives is that they're almost as visually appealing inside as they are on the outside. Their milling pockets throughout have a lot of weight reduction, but are carefully done in a symmetrical way so that they're visually appealing. And that's a nice detail. The overall appearance of this knife is so simple and clean, but the lines of this knife are so precise and sharp, making it not simple and not boring looking. It fits so nicely in the pocket because it's slender in profile. The handle thickness only comes at 0.53, or half an inch pretty much, keeping it really slim and light. It just turned into something that's not cumbersome to carry every day, something that's actually pleasurable to carry, something you might even forget is in your pocket. So let's wrap this thing up. What makes this the ultimate EDC for me? Like many others, I really get hooked on a knife by its appearance. And after all, I am a knife collector. But even with that being said, I think it would be a really great choice for anyone, even if this is just going to be one knife for you. Now you have to check your state laws because the size may not be suitable for all states. So check your local knife laws. But if you're looking for one high-tech piece of equipment that's great for an everyday carrying tool, or perhaps you just want to add something fancy to your arsenal of collection, you could do a lot worse than buying one of these. Now, I can completely appreciate that this might be out of some people's price range, and there are other great options for that. But I also feel you're really getting your money's worth when buying one of these knives. They really are quite pleasant to carry and use. They don't tend to frighten people when you pull them out in public as well, and I think this knife is an acceptable size for that. The maintenance has been pretty easy in these last couple years of ownership and pretty minimal to be really truthful. Another thing that the knife does well is it hides wear extremely well. The knife is durable and made to last, and it's used of all the top grade materials. And a lot of the extra time has been spent, and effort as well, to make sure all the tolerances are tight and that the product delivery is pretty consistent throughout the entire batch. This has just been my experience with Shirogorov knives overall, and I've owned quite a few over the years. This also is a great entryway to people who are just trying to get into the Shirogorov brand, and most of their knives will surpass thousands of dollars, so this is a good gateway knife for that. The performance has proven itself over the years of ownership, and I consider this to be one of my go-tos, especially on days where I think I'm going to need to do a little extra cutting. It's a knife that can kind of go anywhere, doesn't frighten people in general public, but when somebody actually holds it for the first time, I've seen a lot of smiles, even from non-knife people. It's what I consider to be a bit of a mild masterpiece, in my opinion. In other words, I like this knife a lot, and I'm going to recommend it to most people, quite often actually. There are various versions of the Neon Zero, and you can do your own research for that one. But overall, I'm going to really highly recommend this knife as something you should consider as far as an everyday carry high-end piece. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell icon so you stay up on my latest and greatest reviews. And we'll catch you guys all on the next one. This is the Watch and Cut channel, out.